Did you know that at one point in One Piece, Sanji, the cook, who is famous and always seen lighting a cigarette, doesn't actually smoke? Instead, in the 4Kids version of One Piece, he was given a lollipop to suck on. If you think that's weird, this is just one of many censorships throughout One Piece. Many of them happened in the 4Kids dub that came out a long time ago, but there's also a few in the original story that we're going to cover in this video. But another insane moment from the 4Kids dub is one of Buggy's crew members, who in the original story is colored, but for whatever reason in the 4Kids version, they decided to whitewash him and change his skin tone completely. Like, what could have possibly been the decision behind this? 4Kids dub genuinely had so many insane decisions and changes. I don't know how they lasted as long as they did and made so many episodes. Like, 4Kids would change plot lines. For example, Bellemere, whenever Arlong raided the Kokoyashi village, Bellemere didn't die. Arlong didn't shoot her, he just imprisoned her. And Bellemere dying is a very important plotline for Nami and Nojiko, so her being alive just didn't make sense. And they had to change it even more because after Luffy defeated Arlong, they would just go free her from the prison, right? Well, that didn't exactly happen. They just said she somehow died while in prison, because at some point throughout the 4Kids dub, Nami is seen by her grave. And it's funny looking at that scene of Arlong pointing the gun at her because it's just his finger in the 4Kids dub. It looks kind of weird. I'm sure you've heard a lot about the 4Kids dub. I want to go over some of the censorships in the One Piece anime that were actually in the One Piece manga real quick. First up, Pell not dying. Apparently Pell was supposed to die when he carried the bomb up into the sky in Alabasta, but it was quickly changed to him not dying in the manga because this chapter was released just a few weeks after the 9/11 attacks in the United States. And according to several sources online, they say Oda and his editors thought it might have been insensitive at the time having a character die from a bomb attack when the United States was just attacked by bombs. Like I said, some sources online claim this is true, but it has never once been fully confirmed by Oda or his studio, so this one's still a question mark. Something that is confirmed though is Ace's tattoo / the Whitebeard logo. Originally in Alabasta, the tattoo on Ace's back looked a lot different. I don't want to show it completely unblurred on YouTube because they're kind of weird about these logos, but to give you a general idea, if you've never seen it before, just think about World War II Germany and a logo that was associated with that. Yes, that is actually what Ace's Whitebeard tattoo looked like, and the Whitebeard flag looked like before it was changed in the anime and later changed in the manga, and for good reason. This was kind of wild to have. Next up, a One Piece censorship was Zeph losing his leg. Now in the manga, it's heavily implied that when Zeph and Sanji were stuck on that random island in the middle of the ocean with no food, Zeph lost his leg because he had to eat it. He gave Sanji all the food they have, and Zeph ate his own leg. However, in the anime, when they cut to a backstory of Sanji, they show Zeph losing his leg in a ship crash. Like, a chain wraps around it and he ends up losing his leg that way. It's kind of a weird censorship because cannibalism in One Piece is shown later on with Big Mom, so who knows the real reason why they chose to censor this part. Another anime censorship in One Piece happens in Sabaody. In the manga, when Law, Kid, and Luffy first meet each other in the auction house, Law flips off Kid, and it's a pretty iconic manga panel, but in the anime, it's just Law looking at Kid. He doesn't give him the bird, he doesn't do anything with his hands, they just look at each other. For whatever reason, Toei didn't want to animate the middle finger, and it got censored. And lastly, before diving into some more 4Kids censorships, we have one more, and it's with Bartolomeo, and it's a bit more recent. So in the manga, Bartolomeo comes across someone who's talking trash about Luffy, and in Luffy's defense, Bartolomeo cuts off this guy's tongue. And that was not put into the anime, and all Bartolomeo does is just let the guy go after telling him not to talk bad about Luffy. And now back to some more 4Kids changes. Alcohol becoming juice. Every scene in the 4Kids dub that includes a bottle, or like the red hair pirates partying, for example, at the start of the story, all of those are changed to juice, and they do not show any alcohol in the 4Kids dub. And in some scenes, they would just completely remove the bottles. Like this one with Shanks, he has his arm holding the bottle up in the original, but in the 4Kids dub, his arm's not there, the bottle's not there, it's just Shanks. This one makes sense. You're making a show for kids. You don't want to show alcohol all the time, people being drunk, so they just make it juice, and it's a pretty easy change. They just change the color of the liquid or the bottles. Out of all the 4Kids changes, this one wasn't the worst. Another change in 4Kids is injuries being non-existent. Characters still fight, of course, like you can't get around One Piece without characters fighting, but when they do, there's never any serious injuries. It's at most a knockout, there's never blood, there's never like people losing teeth, like when Luffy knocks out Arlong's teeth. And part of this is due to the weapons. Weapons are heavily changed in the 4Kids dub. They are made to look like toys. You have this one from Helmeppo, which was changed into this weird toy looking thing. I don't even know what to call that. Guns were changed colors so they look like toy Nerf guns. Swords were changed or just removed completely. When Don Krieg fought Luffy, he shoots these bullets at him in the original, but in the 4Kids dub, it's just suction cups. Like, what would Don Krieg be doing with suction cups shooting them at Luffy? And it wasn't just weapons that got censored, even crosses got censored, like Mihawk's cross or Mihawk's sword that looks kind of like a cross. It got shortened, crosses were removed. I guess in the 4Kids version, they didn't want anything relating to religion, so they just removed it completely. Even major plotline scenes like how Luffy got his scar under his eye were completely removed because Luffy, of course, used a dagger to poke his eye, and you can't show that to kids. So they completely removed that scene, and they basically don't show or tell how Luffy gets the scar. Luffy just has the scar. And real quick, we'll go away from 4Kids and go back to the original One Piece story. Whitebeard actually got censored at Marineford. So in the manga, when Whitebeard's doing his final stand, he looks rough. I mean, he has bullets all throughout his body. He has literally chunks out of his skin. And the main thing is that he's missing half of his face. Like, the dude has a hole in his face. That was obviously pretty extreme. And in the anime, they decided to not do that to his face. And his face was much more normal compared to the manga panel. In the anime, it's just super bloody. And I think it still does the job. All right, moving on to some more 4Kids censorships. I wanted to talk about the 4Kids rap that replaced the intro theme. I don't know if this was them censoring it or more or less they're showing this to kids. The original One Piece Japanese song wouldn't really match with this show, so they put this 4Kids rap, and I'll go ahead and play a couple seconds of it.
Yo! Don't give it up, Luffy!
I mean, hey, low-key, it's kind of fire. I can kind of get jiggy with it. But moving on, let's talk about Smoker in the 4Kids dub, because Smoker, obviously someone who smokes cigars, and not only is like carrying cigars on his chest everywhere, but in the 4Kids dub, those are no more. It's just smoke coming in and out of his mouth. They announced he has the smoke Logia power, and that is the explanation for the amount of smoke on Smoker. He no longer is puffing huge cigars and emitting that much smoke. Some more things in the 4Kids dub were the crazy name changes. For some reason, they changed Zoro to Zolo. I looked up the reason of this, and it was possibly a translation issue, but also I saw an article saying they thought Zolo would sound better with the kids instead of Zoro. And then another change, I guess I was talking about Smoker. It wasn't Smoker in the 4Kids dub. His name was Chaser, because smoke, obviously, smoking, not really for kids. So they just called him Chaser instead. Maybe because he chases Luffy for most of East Blue to Alabasta. Ace became Trace, so they added a TR in the front of his name. I couldn't find any reason for that change. And then remember how we talked about them removing the crosses? Well, they actually changed the name of Devil Fruits to Cursed Fruits. So also removing Devil from the series entirely and just calling them Cursed Fruits. We talked about Beldamir's death being changed. Kuina's death is also changed. Kuina does not die inside of Zoro's backstory. Instead, she was just beat up and people crippled her for life. They don't go out and specifically explain that. They just say she got into a bad fight and now she can't walk. Pretty genius story, am I right? Honestly, low-key better than Down D Stairs. Moving later into the 4Kids dub era, lots of Nami scenes in Alabasta got cut out completely, or they would heavily edit her attire because she wore that like tank top suit and there was a lot of you know what showing. So whenever they would show Nami, they would edit her clothing to cover up the Bazongas. And same with Vivi. They would edit Vivi's clothing to have it less revealing. Pretty much all the females. Robin also got some of her outfits edited, like that white cowboy suit she wears in Whiskey Peak, and for like the start of the Alabasta arc, that was changed up to reveal less. When you're wanting to make a show more kid-friendly, it makes sense. But now let's talk about the entire arcs that were removed from the story. Like, Little Garden was completely removed. There was no Dory, no Bragi. Imagine they make it to Egghead. How would they explain that? Or even Oimo and Kashi in Eni's lobby. But that's not even the worst one. The worst arc that got removed was the Reverse Mountain arc. When they drop down Reverse Mountain, Laboon is not there. There's no Crocus, no Laboon. It's just an iceberg. They have to dodge an iceberg. Luffy's sitting there yelling like, iceberg! It's the most cringe thing I've ever heard. The 4Kids never made it to Thriller Bark, but they would have to somehow explain that if they did. But they didn't. So yeah, some big time lore missed towards the start of the Grand Line with no Reverse Mountain and no Little Garden. And quickly, some censorship with Crocodile in the 4Kids dub. the scene of him holding Luffy by the throat, or anybody holding anyone by the throat in One Piece, those got edited to where it'd just be their hand grabbing like their shoulder or their clothing instead of around their neck. Luffy versus Crocodile in the desert, that iconic one of Crocodile's hook through Luffy, that has changed, of course. Actually, that one's either changed or they just cut it out. I can't quite remember. And then when Luffy defeats Crocodile down in the tomb, he doesn't defeat him with blood because they hardly show any blood in the 4Kids dub. Instead, Luffy uses his sweat because it's so hot below the desert surface. It was so warm down there. Luffy was sweating so much, that's how he was able to hit Crocodile. Honestly, not a bad excuse. And then finally, the biggest censorship of the 4Kids dub. They just kill off all the Straw Hats at the end. At the start of the giant arc, when the ship falls from the sky, it just falls on top of them and it cuts. That's the last episode. That's the last time we ever see the Straw Hats. They die.